Good morning, students. Last week, we treated chapter 2 with the title, The Land and People of Nigeria. In that chapter 2, we looked at the features of the country, the population, the effects of geography in the development of Nigeria. Most importantly, we looked at the effects of the Sahara Desert and the Atlantic Ocean in the development of Nigeria. We also considered and examined the group relations among the earliest inhabitants of the place called Nigeria now. Today, we are in chapter 3 with the title Centers of Ancient Civilization. You will recall that in our introductory lecture, we said that many Eurocentric Europeans and Americans never believed that strong civilization occurred in Africa. We looked or used the example of a famous professor of the University of Oxford, whom in 1963 were asked to include some African courses in their curriculum. Trovarope told his students that Africa has no history and no knowledge of history. That in future, they can have courses in African history. But for today, there is none. The only activity or the only history of Africa is the activities of Europeans in Africa. Apart from that, the rest is darkness, and darkness is not a subject of history. Today, we are going to tell the Europeans that never believed that Africa evolved advanced civilization, that once upon a time, there were great civilizations or civilization sites that occurred in Africa. So, we are going to look at the introduction. And we say that we had earlier noted that in chapter 1, that most European historians did not believe that great civilization occurred in Africa or Nigeria in the past. We have to ask ourselves, what is civilization? And civilization is simply defined as a society characterized with advanced development and organization. So civilization has different characteristics. One, organized government, division of labor, and others. So we want to know, were there no societies in Nigeria that had advanced government, that had things that can qualify them as an advanced society or civilization? We are going to look at some of them. And we say that through the works of the archaeologists, we have been able to know some of the places where early man lived in some parts of Africa and in Nigeria in the very remote past. Some of the places where man lived in Nigeria in the past include the Nok in Kaduna State, Igbo-Ukwu in Anambra State, Ife in Osun State, Benin in Edo State, and a host of other sites. They are usually referred as centers of ancient civilization. The history of these centers of ancient civilization present to us with the scientific and technological development of the early Nigerian societies. Having seen that, we are now going to look at the objective of today's study. And we say that at the end of today's lectures, our students should be able, one, to discuss the different evolutionary stages of man in Nigeria, examine the significance of the various centers of civilization. We also look at the differences, or we also differentiate between the various monuments. We will also establish their historical significances. And finally, we will acquaint ourselves with the stories of the Hermetic hypothesis. We look at the subtopic, the ancient man in Nigeria. And we say that the early man in Nigeria existed in four major stages. The four stages are the early Stone Age, Middle Stone Age, Late Stone Age, and the coming of metal. We have to note that most of the early fossils we study now are not considered direct ancestors to Homo sapiens, but are closely related to direct ancestors and are therefore important in the study of the lineage. We will look at the early Stone Age and what characterized the early Stone Age. And we say that the ancient man's presence in Nigeria was identified particularly through archaeological finds. The early Stone Age period in Nigeria lasted between 2 million years before Christ to about 35,000 years before Christ. The earliest known evidence of this was the discovery of the portion of the skull of a near man's creature near the Chad Republic. It was named Chandatropus and regarded as the earliest accepted type of human being, that is, Homo erectus. This early Stone Age man, Homo erectus, made beautiful and finely worked stone tools in the form of picks and bifaces or hand axes. In Nigeria, large numbers of these tools had been found in many places on the Jos Plateau and at Ngauda near River Gongola. The early stone man engaged himself in the gathering of white fruits, seeds, roots, leaves, and in hunting as a means of getting food. Towards the end of this stage of man's development, fire was discovered, probably accidentally. This discovery was very important to man because it contributed a lot in the development of his standards of living. In cold weather, man used fire to warm himself up. He used it as an aid to hunting. It gave him light in the dark. It enabled him to roast and later cooked his food. He used it for protection against wild animals. Having looked at the early Stone Age, we are now going to look at the Middle Stone Age and what characterized the Middle Stone Age. We say that the Middle Stone Age covered a period from 35,000 before Christ to about 2,000 before Christ. It is a period between the early Stone Age and the late Stone Age. The people of the Middle Stone Age were either Homo sapiens or still closer to him than the early Stone Age man. They used smaller and better finished tools made from stone flakes or blades. Some of the tools were small hand axes, but others were reduced to point and probably attached to wood and used as spears or as knives. The spears must have made it possible for the people to attack and kill more dangerous animals from a distance. During this period, man was still a hunter and a gatherer. Middle Stone Age sites in Nigeria include Okpa Rock Shelter in Afikpo, the Jos Plateau and Little Hills north of the plateau. We now look at the Late Stone Age. The Late Stone Age or Neolithic man lasted from about 15,000 before Christ to about 500 before Christ, when iron was introduced. This was the stage in human evolution when the true man, Homo sapiens, emerged. Although stone tools were still being used, they were polished and some of them hafted, that is, had wooden handles fixed to them. Bows and arrows were invented, and their use made hunting more meaningful and rewarding. Tiny stone tools called microliths were developed and used effectively as arrows. The greatest achievement man made at this period were the discovery of agriculture and rearing of animals. The domestication of animals and the discovery of agriculture brought about tremendous changes in the life of the early man. They encouraged human beings to live in groups and peacefully too, and man became sure of steady and dependable supply of food. They enabled man to control his environment instead of depending on the conditions and challenges and changes in his environment, as was the case in the previous man's development stages. Settled life became possible, and man used his leisure to think of ways of improving his living standard or conditions. The idea of living together made the making of laws for harmonious living in the community necessary. Thus, the domestication of plants and animals set in motion changes that brought about human civilization. Other innovations brought about by these discoveries include the ideas of leadership or kingship, status and social grouping, accumulation of wealth, human cooperation, and division of labor. In summary, we can say that the Neolithic era or the late Stone Age had far-reaching consequences on the early man because, number one, it enabled him to live a settled life where he was sure of food and shelter. Secondly, the discovery of agriculture paved way for division of labor and production of numerous crops, food crops, which were exchanged via trade by barter. It gave rise to increase in human population and subsequently the need for governmental institutions. We now look at the last stage, the coming of metal or the Iron Age. The early man in Nigeria gradually advanced to the stage where metal instruments made of bronze and iron were used. This was the Metal Age. There is no accepted agreement about scholars of Nigerian history about the origin of the knowledge of metal work, particularly iron, and how or from where it reached Nigeria. While some scholars point at the former city of Meroe, that is Sudan, as the source of the spread of that of iron knowledge to Nigeria, some others claim that the now extinct city of Carthage in Tunisia, was the actual source. A third school of thought, however, feel that knowledge of ironwork must have developed in Nigeria itself, independent of any external influence. Having discussed extensively on the story of human development in Nigeria, which we subdivided into early Stone Age, middle Stone Age, the late Stone Age, and the coming of the Metal Age. Our attention shall now be turned to the places in Nigeria where early civilization occurred. We are now going to look at some of the areas in Nigeria that early civilization occurred. And the first community we will identify is the Nok community, or what we describe as the Nok culture. And we say that the Nok culture is an early Iron Age population whose material remains are named after the Ham village of Nok in Kaduna State of Nigeria. It was there that the famous terracotta sculptures were first discovered in 1928. The Nok culture provides evidence of the earliest ancient civilization of Nigeria. The Nok culture appeared in northern Nigeria around 1500 before Christ and vanished under unknown circumstances around 500 AD and having lasted approximately 2000 years. The Nok were extremely advanced society with one of the most complex judicial systems of the time and the earliest producers of life-size terracotta in the sub-Saharan Africa. The most enigmatic and intriguing aspects of the Nok culture are their terracotta statues. The figures, which date back to at least 500 BC, are always people with large, mostly elongated heads with almond-shaped, hollow-looking eyes and parted lips. Microscopic inspection of the clay used in the terracotta shows it to be remarkably uniform over the whole Nok area, suggesting that the clay came from a single yet undiscovered source. Nok. Not much is known about the purposes of these peculiar sculptures, but some theories have suggested that they were used as shams to prevent crop failure, illness, and infertility. Others have suggested that they represent high status individuals who were worshipped by the people. However, the construction of life-size statues is not the only evidence of the advancement of the society. Research has revealed that the Nok people had a highly developed system of administration to ensure law and order. We are going to look at the disappearance of the Nok culture. We say that a sharp drop in the volume of pottery and terracotta in soil layers suggests that the once thriving Nok population declined fairly rapidly, and no evidence can be found of their existence after 200 AD, nor has any evidence been found which suggests a reason for their disappearance. Some have suggested that overexploitation of natural resources and heavy reliance on charcoal may have played a role, while others have said it could have been any number of different possibilities, including climate change, a pandemic, invasion, epidemic, or famine. The Nok culture or civilization left a remarkable cultural legacy for the people that followed after them. But there are still many unanswered questions about the Nok, from why they disappeared to the true purpose and nature of the unique and mysterious terracotta statues. Significance of the Nok culture. We are now going to look at the significance of the Nok culture. Number one, the Nok people are famed skilled craftsmen and are also good sculptors. Secondly, they smelt iron into different ornamental forms like bracelets, necklace, and earlobes. Three, Nok people smelted iron ore into iron implements like knives and bows, which they used for farming purposes. Fourthly, Nok culture may have diffused into other parts of Nigeria, like Igbo-Ukwu, Ile-Ife, Benin, and Owo. The fifth one, Nok culture proved that Nigerians produced and used iron tools and weapons dating back 500 BC, thereby disproving the biased report of the Hermetic historians, who stated, albeit falsely, that the knowledge of iron working diffused into West Africa from the Cushitic Meroe. Having looked at the Nok culture, we are now going to consider the second site strong civilization occurred in Nigeria. We are now going to consider the Igbo-Ukwu culture. And we say that the Igbo-Ukwu is known as the ancient center of iron and bronze smithing with its famous archaeological site. It is about 40 kilometers southeast of Onitsha in Anambra State of Nigeria. The Igbo-Ukwu sites have been dated back to the middle of the 9th century AD, which will make the Igbo-Ukwu culture the earliest known example of bronze casting in the region. Igbo-Ukwu crafts are intricate bronze metal works that indicate invention and high technological culture that made use of various metals not common in the area. The excavations at Igbo-Ukwu were carried out scientifically by a leading African archaeologist named Professor Thomson Shaw and other archaeologists between 1957 and 1960, as attested by Professor Shaw. Let's look at the slide and see what he said about Igbo-Ukwu. That the archaeological research which followed this chance discovery at Igbo-Ukwu has yielded first-class ancient cultural remains that now form a significant part of the heritage of Nigeria and Africa as a whole. We now look at the significance of Igbo-Ukwu cultural finds. We say one, the sacred bronze vessels suggested the existence of a ritual or semi-divine king who used the sacred vessels for ritual purposes. Secondly, the Igbo-Ukwu finds depicted the originators of this artifact as skilled craftsmen who developed advanced forms of social and economic organizations during the period under review. Thirdly, the Igbo-Ukwu finds seem to convince archaeologists and art historians that the stylistic Igbo-Ukwu terracotta appears quite different from those ones of Benin and Ife and was produced mainly through Loswas method of bronze casting. The fourth one, Tostancho's work at Igbo-Ukwu contributed in no small measure in putting Igbo land on the Nigerian map of glamorous art center. Having looked at Igbo-Ukwu, we are now going to look at Ile-Ife as one of the advanced cultural sites in Nigeria. We say that between the 12th and 15th century, Ile-Ife, the birthplace of the Yoruba people, flourished in bronze and iron arts. Queen Lowo, the 21st One and the only female monarch of Ife, was said to have paved the streets of Ife with quartz pebbles and broken pottery. Again, Graham Hakona submits that Ife first attracted the attention of modern scholars between 1910 and 1911 when Leo Frobenius, the German ethnographer, discovered evidence of an ancient artistic tradition in terracotta and bronze. Between 1928 and 1939, more bronze heads were accidentally discovered at Ile-Ife. More archaeological excavations were carried out at Ile-Ife since 1959, and archaeological excavations according to Connor. Let's look at what Connor said about the excavations in Ife. He said that the Ife excavations has resulted not only in many more objects being found, but also in sufficient evidence being collected to show that Ife art is a genuine cultural expression of the early Yoruba people, unassisted by outsiders of any art. We look at the significance of Ife art culture. One, Ife artworks show a high level of technological development. Secondly, similarities between the Ife bronze works and the Sodo bronze suggest that Sodo bronze found at Jeba, Teda, and Jinaga were manufactured at Ife and were later taken to Nupe through trading relationship or cultural borrowings. Thirdly, similarities between Nog and Ife terracotta suggest that the Nog sculptors must have taught Ife people the art of bronze making and iron smelting. Fourthly, some Ife bronze heads served as portraits of their rulers, such as the One of Ife. Fifth, some of Ife works were used to demonstrate the occupational pursuits of the Yoruba tribal group. For instance, a woman plaiting the hair of another woman. And the sixth one, most of the Ife artworks serve aesthetic purposes as they were used to adorn the palaces of the Yoruba Obas. We look at the Benin culture, and we say that Benin's work of art is better known to the outside world more than the artworks of any other Nigerian community, because Benin is the foremost Nigerian city to come into contact with the outside world. Benin's contact with the outside world started with a visit of the city in 1472 by Rio de Saquaira, a Portuguese. Lourenço Pinco, the captain of a ship that carried missionaries to Warren in 1619, confirmed the greatness of Benin by describing Benin Kingdom as larger than Lisbon, or the straits run straight as far as the eyes can see. Having described Benin as the foremost state or town in Nigeria, we are now going to look at the significances of the Benin culture. Benin artwork shows a high level of technological development. Some Benin artworks, like bas relief, serve aesthetic purposes as they were used to beautify the palace of the Oba. And finally, the choice of Benin ivory as first tax symbol in 1977 demonstrated the sophisticated nature of Benin bronze mask culture. This is where we will end chapter 3. Next week, we shall treat chapter 4, titled Traditions of Origin of Nigerian People. Thank you.